Greetings, friends. You are watching the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we will take a detailed look at the situation in Ukraine as of December 20th, 2025. A very large number of significant events have taken place over the past day, so without unnecessary introductions, let us move straight to the review. We will begin with the southwestern and southern regions of Ukraine. Today, information has emerged that the Russian side has once again carried out a large-scale strike using unmanned aerial vehicles against energy facilities and other critical infrastructure in this part of the country. Reports indicate strikes on the Mykolaiv region, the Kherson region, as well as the Dnipropetrovsk region. At the moment, residents of Mykolaiv, Kherson, and Odessa are experiencing serious difficulties with electricity and water supply. Thus, we can clearly see that the strikes are continuing and have not stopped. I would like to remind you that the massive attacks on this area of Ukraine began approximately 10 days ago, and the Russian Federation is showing no intention of reducing this activity. A separate, essentially independent story is unfolding around the bridge near the settlement of Myaki. Today, it became known that local authorities have completely closed traffic on this bridge. At present, it is not functioning, apparently due to the risk of collapse. At the very least, the movement of trucks and heavy equipment across it has already been halted. I would like to remind you that the day before, this bridge was struck using drones. The relevant footage was published yesterday. Let us once again pay attention to these materials. We can see a Russian drone heading toward the bridge in the Myaki area. Ukrainian air defense forces attempt to intercept it, but all attempts prove unsuccessful. The drone reaches its target and strikes the bridge. From this angle, it is difficult to determine the exact scale of the damage inflicted. However, later, other video materials appeared online in which the consequences of the attack are clearly visible. Significant holes can be seen in the roadway. We have seen a similar picture before, but in a different location, in the city of Kherson. At that time, it was not the Myaki Bridge, but the Antonivsky Bridge. Back then, footage was also initially shown of damaged road surfaces following HIMARS strikes carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine. Today we are seeing a very similar situation, but now in the area of the settlement of Myaki. Naturally, the Ukrainian authorities fully understand the strategic importance of this bridge. Today, information has emerged that if it is completely destroyed, and if the bridge near the settlement of Zatoka is also taken out of service, this could lead to a sharp, potentially multiple-fold increase in fuel prices. It is reported that approximately 60% of the fuel entering Ukraine comes through this region, through the southwestern part of the country, the Odessa region, from Romania. In addition, part of the fuel is likely delivered by tankers via port infrastructure on the Danube River and through the Black Sea. Already early in the morning, reports appeared stating that Ukrainian authorities had deployed a significant amount of engineering equipment to the bridge, intending to quickly repair the damage and return the facility to economic operation as soon as possible. However, sometime later, Ukrainian sources published new footage. In these images, we see the aftermath of a massive strike on a parking area or an adjacent territory. It is clearly visible that the attack was carried out using both missiles and drones. Moreover, the strikes appear to have been delivered by missiles with cluster munitions. The multiple simultaneous explosions in the first seconds indicate precisely the use of cluster weapons. It is obvious that the goal of this strike was the destruction of all engineering equipment and machinery that had been urgently brought to the bridge for its repair. These images allow us to conclude that the bridge in the Myaki area will most likely not be restored. It has already been seriously damaged and in all likelihood will be completely destroyed by Russian units in the coming days. Against this background, a logical question arises. Does the Russian Federation plan to implement a similar scenario with regard to the bridge near the settlement of Zatoka? As we have discussed before, the totality of these strikes suggests that the Russian side is not merely seeking to isolate this part of Ukraine from the rest of the territory, but is deliberately destroying logistical infrastructure. It cannot be ruled out that within this approach, a more large-scale operation is being prepared in this direction. We will continue to closely monitor further developments. In any case, it is already clear that the conflict on the territory of Ukraine is entering a fundamentally new phase. There is reason to believe that 2026 in terms of combat operations, provocations, and international operations in neutral territories, will differ significantly from all previous years of this conflict. Next, we move on to the Zaporizhzhia sector of the front, from which a large amount of important information is also coming today. A group of FPV drone operators, known as Seventh Sky, has published footage of reconnaissance activities in the area of the city of Zaporizhzhia. These videos show the Ukrainian side gradually moving engineering equipment south of the city, with the aim of constructing additional defensive lines and possibly even building dams. The Russian side, in turn, is systematically striking this equipment, seeking to prevent the strengthening of Zaporizhzhia's southern flank. This information is of fundamental importance. First, it indicates that the Ukrainian side has begun reinforcing its defenses in advance along approximately this line, fearing a possible strike on Zaporizhzhia from the south. Second, we can see that Russian units are keeping the situation under control and are not allowing the opponent to deploy engineering assets. Practically every newly appearing machine is destroyed in the shortest possible time. All of this indicates that, despite the ongoing fighting for the Huliaipole River, Russian forces are already preparing Zaporizhzhia for a potential siege and possible assault operations that could begin within the next 6 to 9 months. Now we move to the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction. Over the past day, the combat map has undergone minor changes in the central part of the city of Huliaipole. This is how the situation looked on December 19th, and here are the updated data as of December 20th. The adjustments were made based on video materials published by the Russian side. In them, we can see 2 Russian assault troops approaching a multi-story building and throwing an explosive device, presumably a mine, into one of the shattered windows. This episode was geolocated precisely in this area. Assault units were conducting a clearing operation in a building in the area of Tsvetnaya Street, and it was on the basis of these images that the map was adjusted. Thus, we see that hostilities are gradually shifting toward the central and western parts of Huliaipole. Everything indicates that the fighting for this section of the front is approaching its logical conclusion. Already now, many agree that by the end of 2025, the task for the East group of forces is to fully pass through Huliaipole and then possibly advance towards settlements such as Zaliznichny, Starokrainka, and Sviatopetrivka. At the same time, fierce fighting continues for the bridgehead on the Ukrainian side of the Huliaipole River. Russian units are consistently and regularly bringing up reinforcements, while the Ukrainian side is attempting counterattacks. At present, extremely heavy and intense fighting is taking place in the areas of Kovtsevo and Ternovate. Despite the limited amount of information coming from this sector, it is important to clearly understand that a decisive battle for the territory along this line is unfolding here. The outcome of this confrontation will largely determine the further advance of Russian forces, both toward Orikhiv and directly toward the city of Zaporizhzhia. Next, we move on to the Pokrovsk sector of the front. A large number of significant reports are also coming from this direction today. Let us begin with the settlement of Novopodhorodne. A number of neutral cartographic services report that Russian units have advanced deeper into the settlement and have effectively reached its western outskirts. With a high degree of probability, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation will officially confirm this advance in the near future. Subsequently, Russian forces are likely to continue moving westward along the railway line and the T-0406 highway toward the settlement of Medjeve, which is used by Ukrainian armed forces units to supply the garrison in the area of Novopavlivka. In the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad area, serious changes have also been recorded on the maps. Let us examine them in more detail. This is how the situation looked as of December 18, 2025. Already on December 19th, all of Mirnohrad was marked as a grey zone, as initial reports appeared indicating the absence of organized defense by the armed forces of Ukraine. Russian units moved on to the final stage of their advance in this direction. And as of December 20th, information emerged that the settlement of Svitlo had come under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. This was officially reported today by the Russian Ministry of Defense. In addition, a number of pro-Western and neutral cartographic resources indicate that the Russian army already controls approximately 90 to 95% of the territory of the city of Mirnohrad. All of this suggests that within the next 1 or 2, at most 3 days, the Ministry of Defense will confirm the complete capture of this section of the front, after which this territory will be fully marked in red on the maps. Next, we shift slightly north to the area of the settlement of Sofivka. Today, a number of neutral cartographic resources report that Russian units have managed to improve their tactical position in the area of this settlement. Based on the incoming data, the map was adjusted, and a significant part of Sofivka is now marked as grey zone territory. This means that official confirmations from the Ministry of Defense can also be expected from this direction in the near future. The appearance of video materials with flags or other visual evidence cannot be ruled out. As for the Kupiansk-Siversk direction, over the past day almost no significant reports have been published. The only information worthy of attention concerns the situation in the area of the settlement of Siversk. These data were published and described in detail by pro-Ukrainian cartographic services. According to the map updates you can see now, pro-Ukrainian sources have effectively confirmed the loss of control over the city of Siversk. This information was published today. Based on the published footage and photograph, we are not making any additional adjustments to the map. However, this serves as yet another confirmation that Russian units have advanced in the Siversk area and, apparently, have moved beyond its western boundary. At present, they appear to be continuing an active advance westward, toward the settlements of Sviatopokrovsk, Kaliniki, and Reznikivka. On the Lyman direction, the situation remains unchanged. On the Kupiansk sector of the front, on the contrary, certain adjustments have been recorded. Today, some neutral cartographic services supplemented previously published information. I would like to remind you that the day before, Russian sources released footage of objective control. These videos recorded FPV drone strikes on forward positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the central and northern parts of the city of Kupiansk. One of the strikes hit a specific building directly. It was precisely on the basis of this footage that the corresponding map adjustment was made yesterday. Today, additional information has also emerged from various neutral cartographic resources, according to which Ukrainian formations have managed to significantly improve their positions in the northern and central parts of the city. Moreover, reports have appeared suggesting that a garrison of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, located in the area of Stadium Square, may have found itself in operational encirclement. We are talking about an area of dense high-rise development, a kind of Kupiansk citadel. At present, Russian units continue to hold their positions, but we can see that the Ukrainian side is attempting to bypass this area from multiple directions. Next, we move to the Sumy sector of the front, from where perhaps some of the most unexpected and even striking news is coming today. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has announced advances by Russian units in two settlements at once. We have already discussed the first advance, the settlement of Svitloy, which is part of the Mirnohrad agglomeration. The second settlement is located on the Sumy direction, in the Krasnopilya district, and it is the settlement of Vysok. Based on the official report of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, a small adjustment was made to the map. At the same time, the advance itself looks extremely interesting in terms of its potential prospects. This raises a second, deeper question. Is this advance a one-off action intended merely to supplement and make the official report of the ministry more vivid, or does it indicate the beginning of a developing offensive in the Krasnopilya district of the Sumy region? Judging by the geography of this advance, certain conclusions can be drawn. It appears that the balance is tipping toward the version of a localized offensive beginning. The fact is that, according to data from the North Grouping of Forces and the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, the advance took place in the area of the settlement of Vysok, which is located along the railway line running from the Belgorod area toward the city of Sumy. Thus, further movement by Russian units along the railway line cannot be ruled out, with the initial objective potentially being the settlement of Krasnopilya. From there, Russian forces could potentially begin moving toward the railway branch that connects Sumy and Kharkiv, with the aim of severing logistical links between these two major cities. At this point, there is still insufficient information to state with full confidence what exactly is happening in the Krasnopilya district of the Sumy region. This could be either a one-time demonstrative action or the beginning of a more extensive advance by Russian units toward the city of Sumy from the southeast. I would like to remind you that throughout 2025, Russian forces were actively advancing north of Sumy, and extremely difficult and intense battles were fought there for settlements such as Yunakivka and Oleksiivka. I would also like to remind you that in order to stabilize the situation on the Kupiansk, Pokrovsk and Zaporizhzhia directions, the Ukrainian command was forced to withdraw part of its reserves from the Sumy sector and redeploy them to the directions I have just mentioned. It is quite possible that this very factor was taken advantage of by the Russian side when it began active operations in the Krasnopilia district. The Russian command, apparently, is taking into account the serious shortage of personnel in the Ukrainian army and is trying to test the overall resilience of the defenses along the entire Sumy sector of the front, as well as to assess how the Ukrainian forces will respond. It cannot be ruled out that an escalation of fighting in the Krasnopilia district will force the command of the armed forces of Ukraine either to completely halt or significantly slow down offensive operations in the Kupiansk area and redeploy part of its reserves back towards Sumy in order to stabilize the situation. We will closely monitor how the situation develops in this direction. It is quite possible that something very significant is indeed taking shape here. In addition, important news is also coming today from the international arena. It is reported that European politicians and diplomats are once again gathering overseas, in Washington or Miami. Today, another round of negotiations is expected to take place between the American delegation and representatives of the Russian Federation, which will be represented by Dmitriev. Apparently, all of the materials, documents, and preliminary drafts prepared during the Berlin summit that took place several days ago will be handed over to the Russian side. All of this will be discussed, and it is possible that Dmitriev will return to Russia with some form of preliminary decision in order to present a potential plan to the President of the Russian Federation. All that remains is to observe how this diplomatic track will develop. The US Secretary of State continues to hold out hope that the conflict can be resolved before the end of 2025. At the same time, however, the US ambassador to NATO stated today that if no agreement is reached by the end of 2025, there is a high probability that hostilities will continue throughout 2026. Given how the nature of the conflict is changing, its geography, strikes on vessels of the so-called shadow fleet, and the near-total destruction of energy infrastructure, it becomes clear that 2026 could surpass all previous years in terms of the intensity of combat operations. Moreover, it may well become the decisive year. With that, we will conclude today's review. Thank you for your attention and for staying with the channel, supporting it with your views and trust. As always, we will closely follow further developments and keep you promptly informed of everything most important. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Until next time, friends.